Welcome to our most recent podcast of Rock Your Cradle. We're speaking with Alexia Leachman. She is a specialist in tokophobia. And if you don't know what that is, we'll explain it to you. It has a lot to do with giving birth and a deep fear of that, but we'll get more in depth as to what it is. And Alexia, you were saying you also present on BBC Health as well?
UK Health Radio.
UK Health Radio. Okay,
Yeah.
great. Thanks for coming on.
Pleasure to be here, Jeannie.
Thanks for joining. So, Alexia, I wanted to ask you first off, sort of your background of where you grew up and how you got into what you do now.
Well, I grew up in Wales, which is stuck to England. Very wet and rainy there. And I, with a French mother, British dad. And so I left Cardiff and went to business school and worked in marketing and sales for 15 years, eventually working for global beauty brands and as head of marketing and brand. And I decided I wanted to quit all that because it all felt incredibly unfulfilling and shallow, working in the beauty industry for me, at least. And so I wanted to do something a little bit more fulfilling. So I shifted into coaching. I quit my job just as the financial crash happened. So that was really good timing on my part.
If only you'd had a crystal ball.
I know, right? I know. So yeah, since then I've been my business has evolved, my work has evolved quite a bit, but I started out doing personal brand coaching and then shifted more into the mindset. And that's when I started getting more into really understanding what is getting in the way of us wanting to achieve our goals and the things that we want to do. You know, when we're building our own personal brand, you need to believe in the brand, you need to believe in you, and you need to be expressing that in a powerful, authentic way. And so if you don't have the confidence, or if you lack self-esteem, you know, there's lots of things that can get in the way of you being able to do that powerfully. So that really meant that I started shifting my work more into the mindset arena, and I started training in therapeutic techniques. And so that's when I started moving more into what I now call my head trash brand, which is really about clearing the head trash that stands between you and the life or business that you desire. And it was while I was a business head trash coach that I fell pregnant. And it was when I first saw my pregnancy test. And it was accidental. I wasn't planning on being pregnant, or we weren't trying at all. And this is where tokophobia has already started to show itself in my life, because I'd been putting my career first. I've been like prioritizing my work and my business. And I've been with a long-term partner for 8 years, and we've never had the kids conversation. So when I saw that pregnancy test, not only was I in deep shock at seeing it, even though we hadn't been using protection, so there really shouldn't have been a shock element there at all. But I was also panicking about, well, I don't even know if he wants kids. He's going to leave me, blah, blah, you know, all of that going on. But then I was also the deep pit of despair that came over me, which is tokophobia, the phobia of pregnancy and birth. Now, I didn't realize that I had it, that was a thing, and that I was suffering from that. But all I knew was that I was suddenly feeling it just felt all consuming, and I just wanted to sink into a dark hole. And so that was really the beginning of me. That's the next chapter of my life, if you like, as I started uncovering what that was and really starting my healing journey in earnest, as I realized that I took this as being, well, you're a total hot mess, Lex. I was struggling with anxiety and depression at the time. I'd also lost my mother not that long ago, very suddenly to cancer. So I was also in grief. So I was in my head, I was like, you're a hot mess. Like, this is, so I didn't know why I was feeling these feelings around this pregnancy test. I just knew that I had some inner work to do, and I had to get to the bottom of it, because it was, I couldn't stay that way. I could not stay that way. So that was the beginning of this new chapter in my life where healing started taking center stage.
So how long did that last for you?
When I first had that pregnancy test, I then really wanted to sort out my anxiety. I felt like I really needed to feel the depression, the grief, the anxiety. I needed to get to the bottom of that. So I spent about a year, and I sought external help for that, to really start to help me to kind of move past some of what I was feeling. And then a year later, I was pregnant again. And this time I didn't feel that pit of despair that I did the first time. But I still felt like this was terrifying. But instead of feeling like, swallow me now, you know, I don't want to carry on. And I wasn't suicidal, but there was definitely a sense of, wanting to hide away in a dark hole. This time I was like, okay, right, okay, hold on tight. You can do this. If you just get all the drugs and just get someone to knock you out cold for the birth. And then if you're not present, and now obviously, you can't have that. You can have a C-section, but you still have to be aware and conscious and awake. So the idea of being completely knocked out cold and having somebody fish out your baby is not really something that I think a lot of medical professionals would go along with. But that was like, those are the conditions that I needed for me to be able to get through this. And I realized obviously that's not realistic. And so I was like, I've got to sort this out. I've got to sort this out. And so I started trying to sort it out. And so my first port of call was hypnobirthing, because that's the go-to thing that a lot of women turn to for, being calm in birth. And it just wasn't hitting the sides.
Sorry,
it was just...
I just need to pause you before you carry on. First off, we haven't finished the story of your first pregnancy. So was that a successful pregnancy?
Oh, so the very first pregnancy that I had a miscarriage. So I lost the baby at 7 weeks. Sorry, I didn't make that clear.
So this is the second time you're pregnant, but the first time you're giving birth.
Yes.
Okay.
So I lost the first baby at 7 weeks. And the reason that this highlighted to me that something was amiss with me was I felt enormous relief at this miscarriage. The minute I found out I lost the baby, yes, there was this gutter punch of like, oh my God, loss. But there was this equally, if not larger part of me going, thank God. Like, that was a close call. That was a big, huge relief. And that was when I thought, hang on a minute, this is not normal. This is not normal for a woman to feel relief at a miscarriage. Who feels relief at a miscarriage? So this is where I thought, I've got to sort this out. I've got to get to the bottom of why what's wrong with me? And that's what triggered my healing journey to start with the anxiety. Sorry, we'd had a chat before we came on, so I'm confusing what I've shared.
Yes, just to make sure. So a year later, you're pregnant again, and this time the baby is everything's going normally.
So it went to full term.
And at what point in your pregnancy did you realize, I just want someone to knock me out?
Oh, that was immediately. Like the minute I found out I was pregnant, and I was like, well, there's no way I'm going to be able to get like the only way that I'm going to be able to get through this birth, because for me it was all about the birth. Tokophobia is a fear of pregnancy and or birth. So some women it's all about the pregnancy, others it's about the birth, some it's both. For me it was all birth. But the pregnancy was also problematic, don't get me wrong, but at that point when I first got pregnant, because you can't really tell at that point when you first find out, you're not really living the pregnancy as you do when you start showing and having all your body changing. So for me up front, it was the main focus of my attention was, how am I going to get through that birth? The only way is if you move me out. So it was that was how I was.
How far along were you when you found out about hypnobirthing and started studying that?
I started studying that, I would say, in maybe sort of 2 to 3 months in. So I think I was trying to ignore. Also, there's a risk of miscarriage. So, there's part of me like, I need to get through that first 3 months to see if this is something really that's going to, that I need to worry about or need to do something kind of thing. And then once I got past that, I was like, okay, this is getting real. I need to now really take this quite seriously and start doing things. So that's when I sort of sought out. Then I landed on hypnobirthing, and then I started doing the things that you do with hypnobirthing and realizing that this wasn't changing anything in terms of how I was feeling. I was like, this is not touching the sides. I need something stronger. It's like if somebody offers you a glass of beer and you're like, no, I need the whiskey. This is not. I need something much stronger than that. And hypnobirthing,
something stronger.
Exactly.
It's funny because I without knowing what it was called, I had tokophobia when I first became pregnant. But for me, hypnobirthing did alleviate that. But that was because of a few key teachings that I was taught by my hypnobirthing teacher that I don't know if other hypnobirthing teachers cover.
Okay.
But for me, it worked.
Yeah.
And it worked marvelously well. However, it sounds like either you had some other things you were taught, or some things you weren't taught, or it just wasn't enough and you needed more.
It typically depends on, I've not come across, because I've worked with a lot of women with tokophobia. And so there's, when you look at the fear that you see in birth, that you come across, there's mild and there's moderate and there's strong. And then there's phobic.
Yes.
Phobic
Yes.
is tends to be on a whole different level, that's got a lot of trauma at the root, which usually the hypnobirthing approaches on don't deal with trauma. So
you
until
need
you deal with
a therapy.
It's a therapeutic intervention
Yep.
that is what you need.
Yep.
And listening to guided tracks regularly at night is not going to heal that level of trauma.
Yeah. For me, it was principles that were taught. It wasn't the meditations. It was the actual reprogramming of the mental approach of what bodies are supposed to do at birth. It was more than that. But anyway, I wanted to talk more about you. What happened for you after that?
So I then knew I needed to do something about this, and that there was nothing out there that was going to be able to support me, and I was going to need to be the one that did this. So I decided that I would do what I could, learn out of everything that I'd learned, to create a way of me doing this myself. Because when I decided I thought I need to sort of get a clear picture of what's going on here. What are your fears? And when I wrote them all out, there were lots and lots. And there's no way that if you go to see a therapist and you go and see them once a week, there's no way. I didn't have enough weeks of my pregnancy left to be able to even tackle that, let alone the therapy budget.
Right.
So that wasn't an option for me. And so I needed to do this myself, and I needed to do an intense period of healing. So that means that I could get a result I needed in time for the birth. And I didn't know where this was going to go, but I decided I'd test the first beginnings of this fear clearance approach at a first midwife appointment, where I was invited. Well, I was, going through in the UK, when you're pregnant, you have your first midwife appointment, and there's lots of paperwork, you're filling lots of forms, and it's quite dreary as a meeting. But then they take lots of blood tests, and they suddenly there's injections involved, and I didn't know this, and suddenly she sort of springs out the injection needles, and I had a phobia of needles and injections as well.
No.
So suddenly I'm like, and I couldn't concentrate on anything she was saying at that point, because I was just, the needles are on the desk, and it doesn't matter what she's saying, because I'm just thinking, well, hang on a minute, you haven't even told me that I didn't know I was coming into this today. I needed to panic at home in advance. You can't just spring this on me right now. So she went, and then she carried on. She didn't pick up on my change of state that was, I would have thought, quite evident with the eyes that were standing on sticks, like popping out. She hadn't picked up on that. And so then she wrapped up what she was doing. And then I think she picked up on it. She went, oh, well, don't worry, I'm going to get this ready. You can wait outside while I get all the needles ready. And I was like, all the needles ready? Like, what's more than one? This is not helping. So I was responding in a way. So she did get that I was scared, but she wasn't really doing much about that, or taking it on board, or being compassionate. So she said, oh, you can wait outside. So I was right outside waiting for her to get all the needles ready. And at that point, I was like, talking to the technique that I was, okay, if you are any good, this is your chance to show me. Like, show me now. So I then tried clearing my fear of needles and injections on my own in the hospital corridor while I was waiting to be called back in. So just for a bit of context, whenever I've had an injection, ever since I can remember, I've always fainted at the sight of a needle. I've never made it through an injection. I have memories of my grandmother in Paris, because I'm half French, holding me upside down by the ankles, feeding me croissants in doctor's surgeries, having collapsed at injections. Like, I've never, ever had an injection without some kind of drama or fainting going on. So me with this injection situation was, I was not anticipating walking out of that room of my own free will. I was going to be carried out. That's how it always happens to me. So this is why trying to do this fear clearance was a real test, because if it could do this, and I was like, we've got maybe I could use this elsewhere. And so I did it. I only had a few, like 5 minutes, because she only had 3 needles to get ready, so it didn't take that long for her to do what she needed to do. And then she called me back in and said, oh, so are you scared of needles? And immediately, without even thinking, I went, no. And then I was like, well, who said that? Did I just say that? And she went, no. And then I said, well, no, I used to be. Oh, right. What did you do to get past that? I was like, I'm still processing that. I didn't say that. I was like, in my head, I was like, no, I'm just processing. I was just like, oh, some stuff, and just batted away the question. So then I'm sitting in the room thinking, who said that, in a bit of a state, because it was all, now I was in totally new territory and I had no idea. This is all new to me. So now my arm's out, she's getting on the needle, doing what she does on the arm. And I'm like, I'm still here. I never see this bit. So I was kind of in this state of, wow, this is crazy. And then I had the injection, it was fine. And then that was it. Then I was on my way. I was like, oh my God, that worked. Oh my God. So that's it. That propelled me to like take what I learned there and apply it to all of my fears. So I wrote them all out and I just tackled every single one of them one by one. And that would have been during my second trimester by the time I figured that out.
So how many fears approximately did you work through?
I would say, well, I wrote them all on a side of A4 and there were 2 columns of things. So it's 30, 40 things. And that's what I find typically with my clients now, is when they map out their fears, we're separating it into individual, very splinter thin things that are really contributing to the tokophobia. And so, yeah, it's typically 30 to 40 items that need to be cleared. And that's what I had. And so I went through clearing all that myself. And then by month 7, I was like, I think I'm going to ditch that C-section plan, go for home birth. Yeah, I'm going to do that. And I was like, right, well, that means it's worked, right? And so, and then I went to a hypnobirthing course for the day. Loved it, because I wasn't fearful then. I was fine. I was like, yeah, we can do all the things. And I was doing all the things because the fear was out the way. So so then I had a home birth and it was incredible. Lovely and pain-free and incredible for all the reasons that I never imagined that would be my birth experience. But I didn't know at that point whether, maybe it just fluked. Maybe I was just a fluke. I didn't know that what I'd done was a big deal, that I'd achieved anything, that maybe what I did was working. I didn't know any of those things because I'd only had one birth. And so, you hear about women having great births all the time. Not all the time. A lot of people have those difficult ones, of course. But, I was like, well, maybe all the stuff I did was entirely pointless and that wasn't the thing that had the impact. I didn't know. So I needed another birth to be able to really validate my work. And that didn't come around until 4 years later. So, but I parked everything. I got back to doing business coaching after my baby was born. I kind of didn't really, I didn't know I had tokophobia, so I didn't know that healing it was a big, I didn't know any of that. That was all outside of my knowledge at that point. I only discovered tokophobia after my second baby was born. So, so that's the beginning of it was after baby number 2 came around, where word had got out, word had hit the streets that I had achieved this. And so I started getting lots of emails from women when I was breastfeeding my newborn, my second baby, asking me how I did it. And I was like, well, how do you know? I didn't know how these women found out. I literally had no idea where these women knew that I was this fearful one that was terrified. I don't know whether the midwife had, I don't know. But I started getting lots of emails from women who wanted to know how I did it. And so these emails were quite long, so I needed to kind of explain my method and then explain to them how they had to unpack their fears to get to, to what I did. And at that point, I was like, this is getting silly. My baby was like 3 weeks old. I was, in that very new baby phase. And I was like, this is crazy. If I get another email, I'm going to write a book, because I've written these reams of emails. And so sure enough, I got another email. So I wrote another book, and that book is now Fearless Birthing, Clear Fears. So yeah, women can now do what I did by reading the book, and the methods in there, how to unpick your fears. I basically coach them through their fears and their psychology through the book. But when I was bringing that book out, obviously you can write a book. I ended up writing 108,000 words in 3 months. So I decided to write the book in November. My baby was born in October. By February, I had 108,000 words. I was like, well, you're a business coach, Lex. What are you doing? You've just written a book for pregnant women. Why? What? This is ridiculous. What are you doing? And I thought, and also you need to edit. There's lots to do in a book. So I was like, well, until the book's ready, I'll launch a podcast. My business clients, mainly men at the time, I was like, they'll never know, because they're not going to listen to, a lot of them are gay. I was like, they're never going to listen to a pregnancy podcast. I can do that on my maternity leave and then get back to my business clients once I get back to work. So the plan was just to get a podcast out, share some of the key elements of my work and the book before I had the book ready, and then get back to my head trash brand and my business coaching and all of that. But the podcast went crazy from day one in terms of downloads and stats. It just took off in a way that, and I had a podcast already, my Head Trash Show podcast, which had been at the top of the charts and self-help charts on iTunes. It'd been nominated for an award in Las Vegas, of all places. So I kind of tasted success in podcasting terms, having had a good podcast. And then this one just eclipsed it completely. And I was blown away because I wasn't expecting it. And I was recording a lot of these episodes breastfeeding my baby, like with no sleep. And so I wasn't kind of putting a lot into it in that sense. I just was desperate to share what I knew, what I'd been through. And lots of women clearly felt the same, and they were seeking out this information. So then they wanted to do what I'd done, and my stuff wasn't ready. So I started creating little products for them, little things that enable them, like recordings, and just so that they could also clear their fears themselves and prepare for birth. And so then at some point I thought, I've got to park my head trash business and focus on this, because these women, they need my help. Like they're like desperate. They were getting, the tone of the emails I was getting was like, you need to tell me what you like. I need this. And I felt like the businessman that I'd been working with, I was like, well, they'll be fine. They can find some other business coach. They'll be okay. These women, they need what I'm doing. So I parked my business and then pivoted into birth and pregnancy work.
So what year was that?
My baby, she's just turned 9. So that would have been 2015.
Okay.
So then I started creating lots of DIY products, self-healing products, because a lot of women that are on the pregnancy journey, they've quit their job or they're on maternity leave, they haven't got the money necessarily to invest in things like this, because they have to ask the husband for money. It's a different, I was used to having business coaching clients where, the money was going through the business, it was an easier sell. And suddenly I'm creating things for women where they're like, well, I can't afford it because I'm on maternity leave, or, that's a difficult situation, of juggling kids and all of that. So I really wanted to make it affordable and accessible so that women could just do this fear clearance work themselves. And of course, if they wanted to work with me, they could, but they had that option to be able to do this themselves. And so that's where I started creating lots of online products. And then midwives were like, well, I want to use this with my women in birth, and doulas, I want to use this. So then I was being asked for training. So then I created a training course. So now I train doulas and midwives. Anybody in the birth space that wants to learn this and use this in the birth space, or that helps families to prepare for birth, and that wants to be able to offer them fear clearance using this method to their clients, then I offer training. So there's a lot of responding to what people are coming to me and asking for. And I've also since then developed the technique a lot further. So now it heals traumas. It's a full-blown modality now. And so I've got therapists that train with me, coaches, as well as midwives and doulas. I've got a lot of therapists who are clients who have tokophobia, who they said, I've never, like in the past 4 weeks, a lot of my programs are very short and intense, said my anxiety in the last 4 weeks has gone in ways that I've never been able to achieve in 15 years of doing therapy. I want to learn this and use this with my clients. So because it's very potent and it works rapidly and delivers results that have eluded lots of other techniques and modalities, the therapists that have been clients have then wanted to train so they can use this with their clients too. So
I've seen so many different therapies and so many different modalities. So the one you're talking about, is that one that you adapted for someone or created yourself, or how did it come to be?
How did it come to me? So originally I trained in lots of modalities. So including things like tapping, TFT, NLP, and then I was invited to be on a training program that was a new energy modality, and there was only like a handful of us, only 5 of us on this training, and I was the only person that really understood. The guy kind of he said he channeled it, or he said he got it, and then he shared it with us, but nobody else really understood it in the way that I understood it. And then he wanted to partner with me. He said, you clearly understand this. So we partnered together and worked together. And then I helped him to develop it further and make sense of it. Because it literally was like he received it, but wasn't quite sure what it was. And I helped him to make sense of what it was and why it worked and how we had to present it and how we had to, just basically develop it so that it could be
Yeah.
used successfully and trained. That bit was missing.
Okay.
So yeah, but then in doing that, then he got very ill and needed to focus on his health. And he said, look, you take it. I'm giving it to you. You carry on developing it in the way that we're doing. So I carried on developing it myself, adding more aspects to it, adding more belief change work, trauma healing. So I've just been adding to it and refining it, testing it, refining it. So it continued. So I then decided I needed to give it a name that was reflective of my work. So that technique is called head trash clearance.
Sorry, say again.
Head trash clearance. So it clears head trash.
Okay,
yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So I call head trash everything like fears, anxieties, stresses, crappy beliefs, traumas, wounds, anything like that that's getting in the way of you being able to connect to your heart space and to be still in mind and to be able to be happy inside and content.
It makes sense. It makes complete sense, that name.
Yeah.
So what are the basics of it? You said you cleared this phobia of needles within minutes waiting outside of an office. What are the basics of it? Is it a combination of physical stuff, mental stuff? What's the basics?
So it's an energy psychology technique, and that means the definition of an energy psychology technique means there's a combination of pressure on acupressure points combined with a psychological framework, combined with focusing your thought energy on the thing that you want to heal. So in the context of head trash clearance, what that means is the applying the pressure on acupressure points. We borrow this from the tapas acupressure technique, TAT for short. So that involves putting your ring finger and your thumb on the bridge of your nose with your middle finger in the center of your forehead, and then your other hand on the back of the head. So when doing that, you're applying pressure to key acupressure points in the body. So that's and there's another, you also use the magnet swipe from the emotion code in another one of the frameworks as well, which involves taking a magnet and just swiping it from the point that's just between your eyes down to the back of the head, just where your hairline meets your neck. So there's different.
So a literal magnet or visualizing a magnet?
Oh no, a little magnet. So natural, just a fridge magnet or a.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I've got one here. I don't know. Here it is. No, it's not. Sorry, I've just got that you have on your notice board. I've got some little stones that look like magnets, hematite stones, and they're just I use those. But fridge magnet will do.
My son loves hematite.
No, they're brilliant. They're because they feel like pebbles as well, so they're much nicer to hold in the hand than a fridge magnet that's got a picture of your trip to New York on it or something. So the magnets there's the acupressure aspect to it, and using the meridians, and then there's the psychological framework. So this is about, there are a set of mantras with this technique that explore the different aspects of head trash, the different dimensions of head trash. And so there are 10 mantras in the DIY version that's in both the Fearless Birthing book and the Clear Head Trash book. The Clear Head Trash book is just for general consumption, whereas the Fearless Birthing book applies all of it to the pregnancy and birth journey. And so these mantras have got a blank in them. So it's like a fill in the blank template, and both of those are in the book. And so the first part of the method is you identify what it is that you want to work, what you want to heal. So it could be your fear of pain. Or fear of needles and injections, as mine was in that moment. So you then take needles and injections, that's the thing, and you insert that into the mantras, or pain, and you put that into the mantras. So whatever it is you want to work on, you just insert that into the mantras, and then you repeat them. And there's 10 of them, and you repeat each mantra in turn, and you stay with each one for about, repeat it 10 times, maybe 15 times, while holding your hands, and then you move on to the next one. And so that process, there's the short emergency version, which I was using in between contractions and which I used in the corridor. And then there's the long version, which might take 20 minutes or so. And then once you've done a full clearance, you need to do the opposite, because it creates neutrality. And this is what makes it potent, is the fact that we're creating neutrality around something. And you can't create balance if you only work on one side of the thing, right? You need to make sure that you clear the energy at the other side. So then you identify what the opposite is of the thing you just worked on. And then you do the same, you just repeat and go through that process again. And so because you have to do both sides, it takes about 40 minutes. So
if you're doing the fear of needles, what would the opposite of that be?
Well, and because that's a trigger in itself, there's no opposite to a needle, because that's the one that's triggering the fear. So you've picked up on my point there. When you work on triggers, like again, pregnancy is a tricky one. You know, the opposite of being pregnant is not always an obvious one for many women either to identify. And it can be different for anybody, but when there's a trigger, it's usually just the thing. But then if you're working with an emotion or a value, like, you know, if somebody's being disrespectful to you, or they're ignoring you in the birth space, for example, or they're not listening to what you want as part of your pregnancy journey, so you're feeling ignored, you're feeling misunderstood, then you go to the opposite of that, which is being understood or being listened to, or, you know, so that's where the balancing is taking place. But with something like injections, that's one of the one of the only ones where it's very difficult to do an opposite for.
So how far do you subdivide those fears when you start doing the mantras and the work on them? You said you'd have women break it down to 30 or 40 points.
Yeah.
So would fear of pain in birth be broken down to fear of getting a needle during birth, or fear of getting cut during birth, or fear of...
It can get quite splintered. It depends on the individual. So for me, I cleared my fear of pain in my pregnancy. So, but when I was in labor and my baby's head was crowning, and the midwife was like, baby's not coming, keeps going back in, like, if your baby doesn't come out, we're gonna have to take you into hospital. Like, there's no way I'm going to hospital. So at that moment, in between contractions, I went inward and went, why am I not pushing this baby out? And I realized I had a fear of pain of the ring of fire. So I needed to then clear that.
It's not a very good name though, ring of fire. It's not very...
No, I know, but that was exactly, I knew exactly what that meant. And so I had to clear that, because I hadn't cleared that specifically, which was holding me back in that moment. So what I say to people is, you start general with whatever it is you're working on. And if you still doesn't feel like it's clear, you just get more specific and more specific, and you hone in until, so for example, one thing that's very common for women on this journey is the fear of losing control. So that can then get into the fear of losing control of my emotions. You know, maybe when they might start crying or whatever during labor, that could be what's going on. Or they maybe get very bad anxiety attacks during their pregnancy, and they're afraid of what that might lead to. But it could be losing control of my body. You know, nature's now in control of what's going on here, not me. So it's what my body might be doing. You know, for those women that are worried about peeing and pooping during labor, or whatever's going on. So you might need to get more specific based on what is going on for you. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. I also wonder if they go even deeper than that, because the fear of losing control, that would be rooted in most likely a different type of fear, like a fear of people rejecting you socially because you don't appear to be in control, or a fear of, you know, of not being able to affect the change you want to, or fear of not being there for your child if you're not in control. You know, like, it seems like there'd be another layer.
Oh, there is. It's very, very entangled. That's why there's at least 30 to 40 things on the list, because there's fear of judgment, there's fear of making the wrong decision, there's fear of not being liked, of not getting approval. I mean, I don't know, this is where it's very specific to the woman, because one thing I will say is that most, like 90% of those things that she needs to work on are nothing to do with birth. Like, it's all, you know, control is not a birth thing, that's a human thing. You know, guys have that. Fear of being vulnerable, fear of not coping, not being strong enough. These are just human fears that humans have, but they just, the pregnancy journey forces women to confront them in a very powerful way. So if you've got all of that going on, and there's a trauma that's feeding some of these anxieties within you, you've got a cocktail of stuff that means you are now struggling with tokophobia. So it's identifying the fear of judgment, the fear of not being supported, not being listened to, not being respected. All of this is what plays in to the tokophobia.
I think, well, there are several thoughts I've had about that as you were speaking. First is that, as I said a moment ago, that all those seem almost a result of a fear of something else that would create a lack in some way. Like, if people saw you as not able to do something, they could withdraw, and that could be danger to you and your child. That's a basic physiological fear. We need social support around us, especially a woman with a newborn. We really need that. But then the other end of it would be when women are going through this, that trauma, if it happens, does that trauma itself, do you just address the trauma through your mantras and your fear and the technique you have? Or do you address, which way do you go for it? Do you address the experience, or do you address the emotions that resulted from the experience, or both?
It's,
do you get what I mean by that?
yeah. There's different
Okay.
there's different ways of going into the house of meth. Like this kind of like
Into the trash.
yeah. This is basically what we're wrestling with. And so there's these clumps.
Yes.
If you just imagine a very knotty hair, you'll have knots, and you've got long hairs like the same here.
Yeah.
There's going to be a knot that you always get down here. There's another one. So tokophobia is these different clumps. And so there's the control clump is always there. The trapped one, feeling trapped by your not having choices, not being, trapped on the motherhood journey, trapped on the pregnancy journey, trapped in labor. You can't get out of that until the baby's there, kind of thing. There's lots of experiences there that are very trapping. So first of all, it's theme based. So what are all the conflicts that are going on that mean that when that conflict is taking place? So for example, the conflict between wanting to be in control and your fear of not being in control. I mean, that's just kind of butting in, and the butting in of that is what creates the anxiety and the fear. So it's about healing all these different conflicts. Now, if it doesn't heal straight away, that to me suggests there's a trauma going on that's feeding the conflict. So sometimes an obvious place to look for trauma, especially in the context of tokophobia, is the trauma of your own birth experience. A lot of women with primary tokophobia,
can you just repeat that? Because I think a lot of women have no idea that's true. They don't know.
Trauma of your own birth experience, your own arrival into the world. And see, the way that we define tokophobia is not we, but someone somewhere has defined tokophobia as being primary or secondary. Secondary tokophobia is when you've had an experience of giving birth. So usually it's women that have had a traumatic birth experience, and now they're like, I don't want to do that again. And now they're terrified of going into birth again because they don't want to, that's too much for them to deal with. Primary tokophobia is when women did, like I did, I'd never given birth or been pregnant, and yet I was terrified of this. So they define it as where you haven't had a direct experience of giving birth or being pregnant. It's like, well, but we have all been born. We've all had that experience of birth. So you don't have to have been the woman giving birth to experience birth. You could have been the baby struggling through the birth canal, whatever your experience was of being born. And it's how you experience it as a baby, not how your mum did. So you can ask your mum and she'll go, oh, it was fine. Like, who cares what she says? It's what you as a baby felt. And if you were struggling down the birth canal, like I found that when I was going through when I was pregnant and I was looking in the pregnancy books, the books where it's like, oh, your baby's now a melon and it's an aubergine or whatever it is. I could not look at the picture of a birth canal, like the diagram of a birth canal. I could not look at that. It brought up huge panic, and I had to close the book. And I didn't look at the book again because I couldn't handle the diagram, which again makes no sense. But when you look at the context of, oh, well, that was my birth, and that was where I experienced trauma in that birth canal, that's why I had tokophobia, because it was my own birth experience. So your own birth experience is an obvious place to look, because the problem with trauma is a lot of people presume that your traumas are the experiences that you have conscious awareness and recollection of. But most traumas that you are carrying around with you that are unresolved are ones that you have no idea that you had. Either they're micro traumas, we've got no conscious recollection. Maybe it's in a neutro trauma, ancestral trauma. Like, you might not have a memory of it. So healing those traumas is very difficult when you don't know where to look. A classic one of not being aware of is your own birth, because not many people remember their own birth. So that's where I go to first of all. But knowing which trauma it is outside of that is a bit of a mystery. I will say to them, if you had any, maybe if you had an abortion or, any sexual abuse, or is there anything going on that could be at the root of this? But they kind of go, no, this is why this doesn't make sense to me. I don't understand. There's nothing. This is why tokophobia for many women doesn't make sense, because they can't point to anything. One lady that I was recently working with, when I was listening to what she's also struggled with body dysmorphia ever since she was a teenager. And I was like, okay, well, I think your trauma is your puberty trauma. And she's a PTSD therapist. So she's like, I've done my traumas. Not I've done my traumas, but she was like, I've been looking at my traumas for a while. What do you mean puberty trauma? I was like, you've got puberty trauma, because the patterns that you're showing here are exactly the same that you experience with your puberty. The loss of control of the body, the fears that you have would have been put in, tell me about your puberty. What was that like for you? Oh, it was a nightmare. Right, okay. So then she went to heal off the puberty trauma, body dysmorphia, tokophobia, collapsed, because that was the one. Didn't collapse, it meant that when we did any healing from then on in, it was really easy because there was nothing feeding it. And then she became one of those Insta mummies on Instagram showing off her bump and all this. She never could have done that before because she was not, you know, not in a position to be able to show off her body and be proud of it and love it in the way that she was now able to do. So the trauma that is going on, you kind of need to wait for it to kind of show its face. And I look for that. I either look in the obvious places, and if I don't find anything, I'm like, wait until we've done some healing to see what's not shifting, and then dig based on what's not shifting and what, you know, and then that would direct my attention in terms of questions, or look at the patterns about what kind of life experience that could be for somebody. Does that answer your question?
It does. It leads me to another one though. What you're talking about, it makes so much sense. I'm actually in the middle of writing a book about generational, not just generational, but the westernized plus approach to birth, and the way it's been medicalized to the point where it had, like you were talking about, to have the idea of have someone knock you out and extract your baby was standard practice only a few generations ago. And, you know, even going back further. And so no wonder there's so much trauma surrounding birth, because the natural method of birth, not natural as in, when I say natural, sometimes people think that means without medication. What I mean is the way the bodies naturally function is that a woman is awake and aware and involved, and there are positive, wonderful hormones flowing. But when you're asleep or knocked unconscious, that's an entirely different situation. So that brings me to with the traumas you're talking about, I believe, as a underlying principle of the question I'm about to ask, I believe the Pareto principle is very real, and that most people, the great majority of people will have things in common, types of traumas in common, like you were talking about, maybe puberty trauma, maybe there was some sort of sexual assault or abuse or what have you. So what would your top one be, that for a woman who comes and who is watching this podcast and says, I think I have tokophobia and I don't know where it came from? So we've got primary, which is usually from your own birth, right?
Yeah, I would go
and then
to that.
Secondary from a life experience. So for both of those well, I guess the primary is from your own birth, but for the secondary, what would the Pareto principle, or in other words, the vast majority of women, what would be the thing that you would recommend that they start with?
Well, if it's secondary, tokophobia, it's from their previous birth experience. So they need to heal.
Okay.
It's all the secondary is always going to be. I've found that through my work, I tend to be working with the primary.
Okay.
Tokophobia, because they don't understand why they have it. Those that have had a difficult birth know to go to trauma therapists. They don't always do that, because some will they don't realize that actually healing a trauma can be relatively quick and painless. It doesn't have to be this awful experience of reliving everything. It can be quite elegant and fast. But yeah, so if you've got secondary tokophobia, just go and find a trauma therapist to help you let that go. Absolutely.
So if someone has primary and they've bought your program, and they can't afford to work with you one-on-one, like you were talking about, accessibility and affordability, where would you recommend they start?
They can, if they go to the fearfreechildbirth.com website, then I've got, speaking back to your Pareto principle, I went through all of my client notes ever since I've started working with women, and identified the 30 things on everybody's list. So those 30 things are likely to be the 80% of your tokophobia. There's going to be 20% of your tokophobia that's going to be down to you. So some people, are going to be more about that they're okay with pregnancy, but they're not okay with birth. They're okay with losing control, but they're not okay with feeling trapped. I mean, there's going to be swings and roundabouts. But there's 30 that I've identified, and I've created the mantras. So they don't even have to learn the technique. They can just buy. I've called it the Pregnancy and Birth Fear Clearance Pack. And if you've got tokophobia, get the upgrade, which gives you 30 instead of the top 10. And yeah, you can just work your way through that. then but there are many people that are like, well, why am I doing this? What they want to know. They want to understand why the technique works. Why am I doing this? Why And I'm like, well, I know that this is not that program. If you want to understand the method and you want to learn the method, that's a different program. I'm just giving you the shortcut for you to get rid of your fears. And if you just work those 30 on your own, you can take all the time you need, and that's like $70 or something. So they can just work through that on their own. But what I've found is that many women with tokophobia, it's really hard for them to eyeball their fears, because this is what's required with my method. You have to name it, think about it, say it out loud, talk about it to yourself. You're saying it. That's when you're saying the mantras to yourself. You can say them in your head, but you have to say them, articulate them. And some women can't even bring themselves to do that. It's too hard. Some of them, I know when I've got clients I work with, I do that bit as I take the therapist role, but I don't call myself a therapist. It's, I do that. I'm the one that says that to them. And they'll be crying. They'll be like purging and purging. They'll be releasing a lot of pain through that, because it's so hard for them they need somebody else to say it. That's why I've recorded the clearance tracks. Some people just buy the audio track and they can just listen to it, and then they'll spend 40 minutes just crying on their own, listen to it, letting it all out, because this is all pain that's inside. They just need to release. So it's just giving it, once we give it a name, but you've got to be up front. You've got to be open to being a crying mess for 40 minutes. Not many people are, actually. They don't really think that if once they start crying, that could escalate into something a bit more serious than crying, but actually crying's okay. Crying's really good. It's you releasing. So don't feel threatened by the crying, and embrace it. If you're crying, it means you're releasing stuff, and that's a good thing. But some people don't want to go there. So the DIY route is good for those that, I've had many women that are like, just tell me what I need to do. I'm going to do it. And then they do it, and they get amazing results in a short amount of time. And they've just stepped up to the plate, done the work, got the results, and they're on their way. Others need a lot more hand holding. They need kind of, they just need to be held through that process. And we're all different. So if people need holding, then of course. So this is why I want to train more people, because I've got women in New Zealand going, I can't, none of the time zones work. Like people need to be around the world so that to support these women, because I don't want it all to sound really upside up, so they can be supported in the way they need.
You need to start getting training trainers, I suppose. So if anyone's listening to this and is interested in that.
Well, if anybody's a therapist and would like to work with tokophobia, is get in touch, because I'd love to train you. Because the one thing I'm finding is that a lot of the people that come to me, and I've got Facebook groups with women in talking about this, is that they go to therapists and the therapists have never heard of the condition. So not only have they not heard about it, but they don't have any experience of it, and they don't understand the psychology of it. So they're not well placed to really help them. So I'm not saying that no other healing method will help with tokophobia, but unfortunately not a lot of people out there have had it and healed it and can walk people through it. So understanding tokophobia is key, because that gives you the shortcut through it. These women haven't got, when she's pregnant, she hasn't got a long time to get this sorted. She needs to get healed quick. So you need somebody that knows what they're doing and that understands where to look for the traumas and the conflicts and and all of that. And then also, unfortunately, there are many therapeutic techniques that just don't work for tokophobia. So you could just be spending a lot of time, and I hear that a lot, where women are going to get help and they're still at square one, nothing's worked, and they're not getting anywhere. I tend to get taken on as a last resort. Well, I've got nothing else, I've tried it all, and then we get the result. So so any therapist that wants to be there to help women in this way, please do come forward.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's not a time frame of years. This is sometimes you got a few months, a few weeks. You just got to get it done.
Exactly. And typically now, when I did it when I healed myself, it took me 3 months, but I was figuring all this out. I didn't know what I was doing, because I was making it up as I went along, kind of thing. I was just using my intuition and being guided by that. But now, depending on typically I can get it done, get people healed in 3 to 5 weeks, unless there's significant anxiety, let's say severe anxiety or depression going on, or OCD or some other mental health condition, then that might take maybe 3 months. But generally speaking, it can be that we're talking less than 3 months typically. And that's not just as with me as a practitioner, but I've had a lady that she approached me. She said she was experiencing really bad depression, terrible tokophobia, really wanted to be a mum, but couldn't afford me, couldn't, she was like, I can't even leave my bed. I'm just in the fetal position all day, crying at home. I can't do anything. I can't exist. And I said, well, okay, I've got a self-healing membership, which has got loads of mantras for lots of things where people just crack on and just pay for as long as they want to be in there to do their healing. And then, so she said, okay, and that's like $29 a month. So that's really, like really good, affordable a way to go. And then 2 months later, she emailed me saying she was cancelling. And I was like, oh no, my membership's rubbish. And I was like, oh, I'd love to get, how have you got on? She went, oh my God, you've saved me. It's amazing. I feel so much better. My depression's gone. My tokophobia's gone. We're now going to start trying for a baby. And I think she's due like any day now. So yeah, she said, and she did all that herself. It's that I just provide videos, like, there's no involvement from me in that membership. It's just all DIY. And so she self-healed her own depression and her own tokophobia in 2 months. And it cost her less than $70. So if you want to do that kind of healing work, you can, but you need to be, I said, how did you do it? What did you do? What's your secret? She goes, I did 1 clearance every day. That's all I did. And that's less than an hour. But in 2 months, she turned her life completely around. So this kind of transformation is possible. You don't have to have the money to work privately with somebody. You could just do this on your own. And that's my Clearance Club membership. So if anybody's interested in joining that, that's the Clearance Club at clearheadtrash.com.
Clearance Club.
Yeah.
Oh, brilliant. That's a really inspiring story.
Yeah, totally. I know. When I got the email from her, I was in tears. I was like, oh my God, like I didn't realize that, because I'm all about self-healing and helping people to do this themselves. Yes, of course, I'll be there for those that want to work with me, but there's such a mental health crisis in the world and so many people struggling from so many challenges, and life isn't easy. The world is a very uncertain place right now. There's not enough therapists to go around. We need people to be able to take ownership of their mental health, of their emotional well-being, and we just need to let them do this themselves. And so when I teach people my method, that's it. They learn it. They've got the tool for life, and they can use it whenever they need to. I've used this on my kids. My kids' fear of dinosaurs when she was young, fear of spiders, fear of monsters under the bed when they were 3. So I was using it on them when they were young. And, it's an adapter, you can use it for your family, but also use it professionally and, help people. So it's very versatile in that sense. And I just think people need to have a tool like this available to them so that they can be happy and deal with whatever they're facing in their own life, not have to go and see a therapist every 5 minutes, and outsource that healing, like to be able to own that and take charge. And yes, maybe get help for the tricky bits, the traumas or whatever it is. But most of it, I believe the 80-20 thing, that going back to what you're saying, a lot of our own anxieties, you can self-heal. People just need to know how to do that. So that's what I want to help people, is to do that bit. And if they need help for the trickier bits, sure, let's, work with a professional. But most of it you can do yourself, I think.
So I would like to ask you for a quick demonstration of one of your mantras. Obviously, to do all of them would take far too long. Yeah. But before we do that, I just wanted to ask you, for those who are looking to get into something like this, or who are looking to, as you did, make a shift from something they feel is not as fulfilling to a more fulfilling career, I wanted to ask, for your own personal life, how has this affected your feeling of fulfillment, of doing what you do now? I
love what I do. And when I decided to ditch the business coaching, which was good money, pregnancy has not been that, but it feels like such a calling and so fulfilling. I get so many emails from women, like stories like the one I shared. Like, there's one lady who had tokophobia. She went on to have 2 birth babies of her own. The first pregnancy was positive and the birth was positive, but she said there was still some bits that she wasn't super happy about, but in the most part it was positive. Second one was incredible, to the point that she loved being pregnant and giving birth so much that she said to her partner, I really want to do that again, but I don't want to take the baby home. How do you feel about surrogacy? And he's like, okay. And she's now on surrogate baby number 2.
Oh, wow.
So she had tokophobia and now she's a surrogate. Like, that's a massive turnaround, which I would never have anticipated. So the reward aspect of this work now is just off the charts. I feel like my work here is done, but it's not. I have much more to do. But making that shift has required me to do a lot of my own head trash clearance. I do all my testing of this method is all on me first. So this is a reflection of my own healing journey as much as anything. I wouldn't have been doing the work I did today if I'd not healed my own tokophobia and shared how I did that. And I'm continuing to heal. And it was a tricky period in my own life 18 months ago when we decided to leave the UK to pursue our dream of living in the south of France, where I hit a very low point and decided I was then going to heal my traumas, my hidden wounds. And that's when I discovered and created my trauma healing process, because I created it on me by testing it and doing my own healing. So it's all about I think I want to encourage people to just look your head trash in the eye and heal it. Don't be scared of it. Just heal it and get rid of it, because there is an incredible world and life that awaits for you on the other side. And we are so contained and hemmed in by our head trash. It's unreal. So if you want to make a pivot or a change in your life, there's going to be big things you need to get over, like letting go. Is it the right decision? These fears, am I going to succeed? Is it going to be a failure? There's so much there that prevents people from making big changes like that. These are the same fears that come up for women on this journey through pregnancy to motherhood. Am I making the right decision? Am I making all of this the same head trash? It's just different contexts of life, different places in your life. Once you've healed those kind of conflicts and those fears, it's incredible how the ripple effect of that goes beyond. And that's what I'm seeing with my birth work, is that these women that have healed their fears as part of their pregnancy journey and to prepare for birth, they're emailing me years later going, well, because of that, I then decided to quit my job and set up a business. And because this fearlessness that I felt in birth, that was solidified by that amazing birth experience that is powerful for a woman. When you've had that amazing experience and you can kind of connect to that always, and it feeds you. And I'm just getting goosebumps thinking about my own, just talking about that, how that can then give you the energy, the motivation, the confidence, the courage to then make bigger, bolder changes in your life that you think, yeah, well, I can get through birth, I can get through anything. And that's how they feel. They have this fearlessness about them. And it's to use those challenges in life as an opportunity to heal. Life is calling you to the healing table. So just step up, do the work, and see where it takes you. And you can do anything once you do that.
Yeah. I remember after giving birth, I can't remember which time, but yeah, probably even the first time, I was like, right, if I did that, I can do it all.
Exactly.
Anything. Yeah.
And to have more women out there with that kind of mindset, that kind of spirit. The world needs women like that right now. And that's why I feel this is such important work. You help a woman prepare for birth. You're not just helping her, you're helping the child, you're helping the family unit, and the ripple effect that goes beyond that as she then becomes a confident mother, and how she raises her kids, what she then does with her life. And if you want to kind of focus your attention on changing the world, help women prepare for birth. That's my view.
That is exactly what I think. And that's a large part of the reason that this company is being formed and growing, is because women are the backbone of families. And we make the kids, we teach them, we nourish them, all of that. And so much of it starts with having, like you were saying, from even our own births, but then think of the baby that you're bringing in, that birth that you're giving them, and to start that family and their children, just the generational impact. It's incredible. It's huge.
And when I think about when I was in labor and I had some mantras, not from my method, but just some mantras I focused on. This is my second birth, that was very, very fast. And I was definitely in a fearless place, because I'd done so much fear clearance at that point in pregnancy number 1 and then pregnancy number 2, that I was just bring it on. I'm just this birthing woman, And then I had these mantras I just used to focus keep in a really good place. So I was just breathing, focusing on mantras, saying to myself. And my youngest daughter is constantly spouting those very same mantras. She's saying them all the time. And it's just nuts how what you're saying when you're carrying your babies and you're birthing them, that becomes their not their philosophy, but their go-to phrases. And what are you saying when you're carrying your baby? What's going on here? it just blows my mind every time she says stuff. I know I was chanting to myself throughout the labor of her arrival. It just, it's the power, what we hold, the capacity of what we hold within us when we're mothers, when we're holding our babies, when we're birthing our babies. Just don't underestimate any of it. And I know some women are going to think, well, you make me feel guilty now because I don't have these wonderful thoughts. But we need to know this, because if you don't know it and take this seriously, you can't change it. I'm not saying this to lay the guilt. It's about being informed. Once you know that your thoughts are being heard by your baby, go and get the help you need so that those thoughts can be changed, so that you can change that trajectory. That's our responsibility as a mother. And there's no hiding from that responsibility. And I'm not going to be quiet about it.
I feel like my head's on a bobble. I'm just going, yes, yes, yes. This all of what you're saying is stuff that I have been learning and preaching for years. So thank you so much. It's true. It's completely true.
Yeah.
And I'm really, really glad you're doing the work that you do. Like, really glad. Thank you so much for doing that.
Thank you.
All right. Can we do a demonstration of how someone would, when they go to your website and they buy your course and they're learning how to do the mantras, and they can come and watch the pro?
Yeah.
If you could give us a demo of how you would do one.
Yeah. Well, I've got a video on YouTube if they want to watch a whole one. They can sit and clear it with me on YouTube if they want a full-on one. But essentially, and I'll just be very top line about it. The way I look at it is there are 5 dimensions of head trash that we need to clear when we're clearing something. And so the mantras, and because we're creating neutrality around the thing that we want to heal, then we have to, if I was to say to you to get rid of, if I said, I've just handed you a wet, soppy, wet towel, Jeannie, and that you need to wring out, you need to get rid of all the water, so you could hand it back to me, it's not dripping wet. What would you do with that towel?
Take it diagonally and fold it and twist it.
How would you, so you twist it that way? And
opposite direction.
Go the other way, and then you get right. So you go to the opposite one end, and then you go the opposite other end. So if you imagine that towel is your emotional mess, and all the water is all your tears and the emotions that you just. So what we're doing with the mantras is we're wringing out the emotional energy contained within this thing, and so we're taking it to the most powerful emotions they are, and their opposite forms, which is love and hate. So we're loving the thing that we're working on, and then we're hating the thing that we're working on. So every mantra, there are 10 mantras, and there's love mantras and hate mantras. So there are 5 sets of mantras that represent each of the 5 dimensions of head trash. So a dimension of head trash is the idea of something. So if we're working on feeling depressed or fear of miscarriage, it's the idea of depression. So you might read about depression in a blog or see a headline. So it's not affecting anybody, it's just this word, and it's the idea of it, or miscarriage rates have gone up, or whatever it is you've read. And then there's you experiencing the thing. So me having a miscarriage, or me being depressed. So that's another dimension. Then there's other people, because we live in a world with lots of other people. So then how do you react? How do you react when your friend has a miscarriage? Or how does that trigger you? Like what happens to you when you have that, or you know that somebody else is depressed? And then there's other people making you experience this thing, and you making other people experience it. So these different ways of looking at each piece of head trash. And we just love and hate all of that. So when you go and do a clearance, you've picked your thing. Then you put your hands in the position, and then you go, I love pain. Pain is great. I love it. And then you focus on what pain does to you, and then you just say, I love it. And then you go, I hate it. And you just work through the mantras that I provided, which talk to all of these different dimensions, saying I love and hate each one, and you sit with each one for 10 times, 15 times. And it's when the reason why I'm a bit vague around how long is because I don't know how long you need to clear it. Someone like when sometimes you might be able to just say it 5 times and the energy of that's just cleared. Some people need to sit with it for like 3 minutes, 5 minutes, and they're still releasing, because we're all so different. So as a standard, I just say it 10 times or for a minute, whatever. But as you start clearing, you start noticing and becoming aware of your own signs of clearing. What does it look like for you? So for me, it's yawning. Some people burp a lot. Some people get tingles. You start to recognize your own signs of clearing energy. And so then it's about you becoming self-aware and going, okay, no, this feels like it's clear for me now. And you get better at that the more you clear. So, but at first you might just repeat it 10 times and keep it. You find if you're not clear at the end of that process, you just repeat until you feel that you're clear. But essentially that's the process that you need to go through. Does that help?
Yeah, that helps. That's great. I just
I've just got my
wonder for
feet.
women who that's okay. For women who have heard about tapping and seen that, which is, you'll tap along these certain lines and try to clear acupressure points and things that way. How is this a step up from that?
Well, once you've cleared something, it's gone. So you don't need to redo.
Yep.
So when I hear people saying, "Oh, tapping it again," I was like, no, tapping for me is a plaster. It's a sticking plaster. You're not really sorting the root issue out. Why that is, I don't know. I don't want to comment on why that might not be working. But for me, what's different about this is once you clear it, you cleared it. So where it differs is that, so for example, if you're healing a conflict with value, so for example, losing control versus not being in control, that's a value conflict. You're unlikely to need to clear that again, unless there's a trauma that's feeding it. And you're like, hang on, I cleared this, and why am I still reacting? Right, there could be a trauma here. But there's not always a trauma. Whereas an emotion, it's also very useful to calm yourself down rapidly. So because it clears the excess emotion that's floating around. And we're never going to get rid of emotions because emotions are essential. So I'm not going to say I'm going to get rid of your fear, because fear is really important. What we're getting rid of is the ability of that thing to trigger your fear. So we're getting rid of the trigger that triggers the fear and anxiety. Your fear is still going to be there. And if you end up walking over a cliff, towards the cliff, the fear will kick in and you won't walk over the edge, because I want your fear to stay there. It's a very good, useful thing that we have as humans. But sometimes you've got too much kicking around your system. So you might be super stressed and you see everything through your lens of fear or stress or whatever. So when you have a lot of emotion in your system, you're not able to, it's so near the surface that you see everything through that. So if you've got a lot of fear trapped because it's being triggered all the time, you've not been able to process it and let it through, it's right there. And that means everything, it is almost like right, and you can't see anything without seeing it through the lens of fear or the lens of stress or the lens of guilt or whatever the thing is. So sometimes you need to just let go of that excess emotion, that excess that's there, that's more than it should be. And a useful way to think about it is, you think about your phone, and after a while it gets really slow, and it's like there's too many apps on it, and you've got your photos on it, and it's like, and you're like, I can't do anything, and it just shuts down. So you reset, you go back to factory settings. So it just kind of gives you a clean slate. This is what this does with that emotion. You can kind of work on fear as a thing, and it'll just get rid of the excess emotion to give you a little bit of breathing space. So it'll calm you down in the moment. So having a really difficult work meeting, for example, you just need to calm down so you can go back in and not shout at your boss and get fired on the spot. Then in that moment, you might want to just calm yourself so that you're in a calm place again, so you can deal with what's going on, knowing that maybe you have some work to do outside of that environment to try to identify what it is that's triggered that reaction in you, and you can get to the root of it. But in the moment, you can clear the excess so you can calm yourself down very quickly. So it depends on how you're using technique you're using on a trigger, like injections, for example. The sight of a needle, are using it on a conflict, which is what causes the fear and the anxiety to show up. Or are you working on an emotion that you just need to calm down and give yourself some breathing space and not feel so het up and emotional in that moment? Does that make sense?
It does. I like your analogy about the phone or the device when it slows down, because it makes sense of what you were saying. You still have your operating system, you can still run it, you can still function, you still have those natural healthy emotions that protect you, that also keep you being human.
Yeah.
But you get rid of the extra rubbish that's floating around.
Yeah. And there's a lot there.
Yes. Well, thank you so much for your time, Alexia. I really appreciate it. I do have a few more questions for you after we finish recording, but we'll call this good for now. And we will link your website and your books down below so everybody can have a look at that. And thank you once again.
Thank you so much for having me, Jeannie. It's been lovely.
You're welcome. Bye.